I'm very happy to have Professor Meskell with us this afternoon and morning for Lynn. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm particularly happy because Professor Meskell has been one of the source of inspiration for our journal, as much as her work as editor in the Journal of Social Archaeology has been. And I think the more we can share your work also in Italy and among our community of archaeology, the better. So it's a great pleasure to have you here answering our questions. As usually in this case, I will just give a brief introduction. So Professor Meskell is actually now professor of anthropology at the School of Arts at Penn University, while also curating, I think, the Mid-East Asia section at Penn Museum at the moment. And then there is a long list of other professorships that Lynn holds. She is professor at Cornell University and also honorary professor at Oxford and Liverpool and at the Shiv Nadar University in India. So one of the main reasons why we decided to invite you also is because of the energy you poured in the study of heritage and ethics. Starting already in 2009 with your book Cosmopolitan Archaeologists, which was a great take on how to answer to the pitfalls and gaps within the big machine of heritage and ethics and the work of archaeologists. So I would start by asking you, in your book, Cosmopolitan Archaeologists, that has been published in 2009, you already at that time prompt archaeologists to both practitioners, scholars, researchers, to try to strike a balance between our responsibilities, our ethical responsibilities towards the communities that live around the ruins, let's say, in the places where we work, and the impact and the force of any world convention or international code that, of course, we are subjected to. So now it's 2021, but after more than a decade after your book, how far are we in reaching that balance, in your opinion?
Thanks, Martina, and thank you for having me here and for doing this. So, I mean, first of all, I should probably say, yes, the 2009 book is really about the sort of cosmopolitan responsibility, you know, our responsibilities as archaeologists in the rest of the world. But it actually goes back, you know, my first book was Archaeology Under Fire, and I was still a student when I put that together. And that was already also trying to get archaeologists to see their roles in work that was happening in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, in the Gulf, trying to see how we were also implicated in the sorts of struggles and conflicts, you know, of our time. And I think, you know, I was sort of onto something, but it was very new. You know, there was work on nationalism and how archaeology played into that. But what I was trying to do there is put the focus back on us, that it wasn't simply, you know, looking at emblems that of the past that were used by nations. It was actually our fieldwork and ourselves as practitioners going out into these other countries and doing this work and working with governments and being funded by certain people that was having an impact. And I think so that came out in '98, and I think if they then flip forward, you know, to the Cosmopolitan book, that is much more, well, it takes those ideas further, but it's also talking about the ethics and responsibility. It's not just sort of highlighting that we're there and we're doing something. It's one step further to say, you know, how does our work feed back into, you know, the struggles of ordinary people? You know, who wins and loses, as I always say, in these kind of equations. And I think it is becoming more mainstreamed. If you just look at the number of, well, certainly the number of articles, but the number of journals that are devoted to contemporary archaeology, public archaeology, heritage issues, community archaeology, however you want to frame it. It's a little like the trajectory with something else I worked on, which is gender, you know, which back in the day, back in the 90s, used to be a sort of single issue topic, and it was mainly done by women. And you know, that now has been incredibly incorporated and mainstreamed, and it's just taken for granted that you have to consider issues of gender, class, and race, the issues that we were trying to bring out in the 90s. So now that's really mainstreamed. And I think the same is true for the nexus between archaeology, heritage, and ethics. And yeah, I think just publications alone, the way that people write their field work, the sorts of material and that's both being published and being funded, shows that there really is a sort of forward moving trajectory, and it's becoming not a specialized tack on thing at the end, but something that has to infuse all of our work from the outset. So yeah, I think, you know, it's been a slow and gradual move in archaeology, but it's really ramped up. And I think a younger generation just take that mission as you know, normal practice now. It doesn't mean we still don't have work to do, I should say, but I do. Yeah, I think we're in the right. We're moving in the right direction.
Well, that's definitely comforting. So in that sense, I think there is work to be done, but you and many other colleagues worked well. We might have to make some differences, maybe geographically, not everywhere the awareness is that high. Moving on, always related to your works, you've coined a expression, heritage protectionism, which basically relates to the attempt to preserve certain valued sites for, let's say, the universal benefit of humanity. And this type of approach to heritage is definitely linked to a European American based type of development policies, of course, also related to economy, neoliberalism, and government concerns. And this may go at the expense, of course, of the residents, the stakeholders living close to this valued heritage. So we, once again, archaeologists, we do play a role in this. We are the buffer or the facilitators of such policies. And most often, we are still not really where the action is. I mean, we are not always the one called to draft those policies. We are kind on the receiving ends of those policies. So awareness aside, because let's give for granted that we are aware of this as archaeologists, what other tools do we have to be more actively involved in the decision-making process?
First of all, I'm thinking in answering this question about our work abroad. You know, archaeologists do an enormous amount of work overseas, outside their own countries. And if I think about that first, I would say, you know, one way to build our sort of profile and to be the people that are involved and aware and responsible, like I had set out with the Cosmopolitan Archaeology book, is that we have to work more closely with universities. I've set up consortia in India where I work, and also starting to do that in Peru. We have to be more involved with the practitioners in country, not do the sort of colonial come in, extractive, do our field work and leave. You know, most of my work has been, you know, in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean, South Africa, now India. You know, I also set up exchange programs in South Africa. I think this is the way to go. This is the way to work with governments as well. Many of the people I've worked with on those exchanges ended up going into government. So there are better linkages, which puts archaeology on a better platform. In India, we're also trying to start new degrees where you're training people in archaeology and heritage that then go out to get those government jobs. We worked with the archaeological survey there as well to have them part of the training. So these are plans in which, you know, it raises or elevates archaeology and archaeologists to have some say or stake in sites and the future of sites as they affect communities. In terms of protectionism, you know, I don't remember that term, but that sounds very much like me. You know, that can work on many levels. When you think of protectionism, it's also about ring fencing or securing certain sorts of expertise and countries and industries. And I think, you know, as I said, we're still quite colonial. That has not changed. Certainly in the regions that I have worked, that has not changed. So, you know, we protect ourselves as the sort of experts. The UNESCO world also does that. So it's very Euro-American and Eurocentric in that way. And it doesn't really value local expertise. You know, many of my students are working on that sort of topic about authority, whether it's in India or the Gulf or Eastern Europe. You know, I think that's something that we also have to admit, that we're still working or operating under that. There's sort of protected countries who get all of the authority and kudos without recognizing local expertise. That I think has to change. But the other side of the protectionism is it's always about the stuff and not the people. And, you know, what governments do and also what World Heritage, in a sense, sanctions governments to do is to protect sites and places and not people. So, you know, I've done quite a bit of work that shows that the World Heritage label, once you secure that, emboldens governments to be good heritage citizens, but not be very good to their own citizens. So, you know, so it's a multi-layered thing. But, you know, in all of this, and in particularly in this this new job that I have, I'm very aware of the fact that we have to raise the intellectual stakes and the public profile of archaeologists. So at Penn, I have what's called a PIC professorship, which is Penn Integrates Knowledge. And so I spend my time working with people in the law school, in medicine, Wharton Business College, to talk about, you know, corporate ethics, how to change those sorts of attitudes. And so, you know, it's a mix of being very interdisciplinary and getting archaeology onto that stage in a way that political science doesn't have a problem with it, history, philosophy, but archaeology is always seen as you said, as the person you might call if you're on a construction site and you come across something. You know, we also need to have a political and intellectual and a cultural profile. So, you know, that's something I'm very keen to work towards.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably a major flaw in the discipline. I mean, we are used to build fences just to protect things because we don't want them endangered by people, and then we did for a long time the same with our disciplines. But yes, connection with both the communities and also the other disciplines. It's probably the key in all this. Also because we can learn so much more by working with other parties.
I think one American archaeologist said a very, very long time ago that as an archaeologist, you had to be a diplomat, a politician, a fundraiser, a public speaker, as well as an excavator and everything else. And if you think about our jobs, particularly when we work abroad, it is all of those things. So, you know, we do have to deal with, as I have, political scientists, I write with those guys, economists, lawyers, international lawyers, you know, yeah, we also, our material feeds into those areas. So we have to be aware of them in terms of everything from indigenous rights to cultural property, land rights, when I think of the South African work. But we also need to educate those guys about our issues because we are fetishized. People still think of archaeology as something very exotic. And I think if we don't break out of the pattern that we are, you know, digging holes in the ground and it's always about something that happened thousands of years ago rather than the present, then, you know, we're going to be stuck in that same kind of low level position and a very unintellectual, irrelevant position, except if you're watching Discovery Channel. Yeah.
Of course, it's difficult to master all those communication levels, but at least knowing that it's part of our job, and maybe there is someone that is better at doing that than perhaps counting shirts in a storeroom, and then invest in that quality. Still being an archaeologist.
I mean, we're also collaborators. I mean, in a sense, yeah. we are very used to collaboration. We work on teams of, you know, 20, 50, 150 people. I'm used to, you know, I'm not suggesting that we take extra degrees necessarily in economics or law, although I've had students that have done that too, which is fantastic. But I think because we can work in teams, we can collaborate. So that's what that's how I think we should be working. So I have partnerships here with Wharton Business School, as I said, with medicine, at the museum, so all of those are interdisciplinary collaboration. So I'm working with people who are expert in their field, and together you do, you do a different sort of project. And I think archaeologists are very used to that team ethos, so we're different from historians. So if anyone could embrace it, I think it should be us.
I mean, every time we step a foot in a foreign country, we should also know the regulations. And it's amazing because Italy is a place where many international scholars work, and not always they know about our regulations. But as soon as Italians go abroad, they do exactly the same. So that's something that should be, I think, channeled already at the first year at archaeology. You need to.
Yeah, our students need to know that that's no longer acceptable. This idea of exploitation and extraction, it doesn't matter if it's someone else's country. You don't need a permit. I've seen this with colleagues who, thought that they could go to somewhere like India and just take some samples without bothering to have a permit, or and those things have huge ramifications. And of course, I live in the US, and we have no foreign projects that work in this country. It's so interesting how everybody goes abroad, but I don't think there are any permits for foreign teams that are solely foreign teams to come into the US and do the work. So again, it's a very colonial thing. And what you just said is that you may be respectful in your own country, but then, it's like the world is your playground. And so in that regard, things do have to still change. And of course, there are some areas of the world which are treated differently to others, let us not forget. And that is the global South, basically.
So now, since I've mentioned my country that has beautiful things, but also some other shadows, let's finally land on your last book, Future in Ruins. I'm not even listing all the awards that you've been granted. It's a great book. It's not only informative, there is also a bit of thrilling and suspense sometimes. So while you were writing and compiling Future in Ruins, you've been granted access to UNESCO's World Heritage Committee meetings, events, and the actual works of the members. So you were an observer, an external observer, and you say in your book that you witnessed many times the pressure exerted by the most powerful states, let's say, of course, the extent of the lobbying, and also in general the dark side of heritage branding. So Italy has the largest number of sites listed in the World Heritage list, and definitely capitalized on the brand UNESCO. But unfortunately, that didn't really correspond to the implementation of the recommendation coming from UNESCO. So the money spent by Italian and Italian authorities in this case has been more often invested in, for instance, hospitality industry, tourism, instead of the care of the monuments in danger. For instance, Venice, that's one chief example. So definitely the national prestige and the tourism revenues that come together with a heritage, with the UNESCO brand, let's say, have replaced the mandate of protecting heritage. So once again, archaeologists, they do play a role in this game. And do you think it is still possible to educate archaeologists and anyone related to heritage protection about the politics at work in any of these cultural operations, and trying to reverse the trend towards the monetization of the brand UNESCO?
Yeah, also a great and difficult question. Well, it's certainly easy to educate yourself. I mean, that was the point of me writing that book, is I wanted to educate myself and other archaeologists, because it was Chris Gosden actually in Oxford who said to me, it's fascinating that UNESCO is so internationally known and recognized, and yet it doesn't seem to play or it doesn't seem to involve archaeologists at the level that you would imagine, and it's certainly that it once did. And we don't know very much about the workings of UNESCO, and yet we all work at UNESCO sites and things like that. And I said, oh, well, this would be a fantastic PhD dissertation for someone. And he's like, why don't you do it? And I was just finishing the South Africa book, and I was in Paris, and I happened to meet somebody who worked at UNESCO, and it just sort of went from there. So the goal was really to really follow Chris's point, like what happened to archaeology at UNESCO. And when I got into the archives, I found out that archaeologists were instrumental at the setting up of UNESCO and with World Heritage, and that all just dropped out over the years. And so we are not major influential players when it comes to, the Secretariat Paris headquarters or anything, but we are on the national delegations. There are often, perhaps less, increasing as it goes on more politically, but there are archaeologists involved. We can educate ourselves certainly by reading more about how the organization runs from people who've done work inside it, rather than there's a lot of speculation, what I call the industry of opinion, whereas someone will Google a site and do all their research online and write a paper about UNESCO and know nothing about how it really works pragmatically, or the politics, or, who are the decision makers. But you can watch all of this now live streamed. You can watch the committee meetings. There are plenty of documents to show how decisions are changed and manipulated and argued against or supported. So, it's like any good research. You need to do the groundwork. And I spent 8 years in the archives, in meetings with people working at UNESCO at the highest levels, all of these national ambassadors, and then working at places, going to UNESCO regional offices, whether that was in Thailand or Brazil, all over basically. Plus then seeing sites and having site visits with people who are managing the UNESCO end of things. I had worked at World Heritage sites myself as an archaeologist. I'd seen those processes of inscription go through. So pulling all that together, it's just good research. The idea is you don't have to be, a mind reader. You can just do it like it was an archaeological project. Amass your evidence, look at the, the textual evidence, the physical evidence, whatever. And so I think there's no excuse for archaeologists not knowing how that works now. Maybe 10 or 20 years ago, sure, but not anymore. It's far more public and available. And I think with educating ourselves, we can have a greater say, certainly in things like what's happening on the sites as they're being nominated, what's happening to communities, because that's my real concern, is that we're all so excited. And I watched this unfold in one site I worked, where everyone was so excited about the process of inscription. But then after you've got the badge, nobody really cares what happens when the community is sort of pushed out and removed from any decision making, and all the promises that the government made them have now evaporated. We're very self-interested when it comes to our projects and our excavations. But we like to use the community when we want to put in for a grant or give a public lecture, but we actually, we don't really care about the consequences. And of course we leave, right? We do a project for 1 summer or 10 summers or 25 summers, and then we leave. So, that goes back to the cosmopolitan issue about ongoing responsibility. So to answer your question, yes, we can absolutely know as much as we can now. And we can read people who've done the field work, and it's not just myself, but there's others who have done sustained work, long-term work, again, very archaeological, season after season, because things change over those years. And then educating ourselves is key, and then becoming involved in a more ethical way. Archaeologists do many site assessments and evaluations. It's just being a little savvy to what's going on and not being tied up or caught up in consultancy culture and thinking, oh great, this is a free trip, and I get to see some great site and whatever else. It's like being responsible and doing your homework instead of being seduced by the whole sort of, the World Heritage brand itself.
What I think it's coming out of this, it's the incredible potential that we have. In fact, archaeology is always kind of in the middle of one of these dynamics and mechanisms. And as you said, we have to learn so many arts and crafts to do that, to do our homeworks. that then we can be of some use also at other levels, not just when heritage comes into play.
Yeah, I think if you look at historians, anthropologists, philosophers, certainly political scientists and economists, they have no qualms about, you know, standing up, speaking, giving an opinion, talking to the press. You know, we haven't really, as a discipline, you know, we're much more reticent, and we sort of retreat into, you know, I'm a specialist on X, Y, and Z, and in this sort of remote period, in a remote place, and whatever else. And so we sort of are bystanders as a lot of these, well, conflicts and other things have, and again, issues with communities, relocations, other sorts of social violence, as that unfolds, we're like, well, that's not got anything to do with us. We're also very concerned, another form of protectionism is we're very concerned that we're not going to get the permit to go back if we stand up to countries. And yeah, this is unfolding everywhere. So our level of self-interest is enormous because, again, unlike historians, but perhaps more like anthropologists, it is incumbent upon us to be in the field. So we are always sort of looking after ourselves. So those vested interests, yeah, we sort of have to balance that. But that's, again, part of the cosmopolitanship. We have to be responsible citizens too. And, you know, yeah, if you don't want to work under an oppressive regime or a predatory state, you know, you have to change research. And as someone who's changed research from Egypt to South Africa to Turkey to India, I mean, it is possible. I mean, and UNESCO, I mean, I'm not 100. It is possible to do that sort of work and different sort of field work, and know when it's time to leave a country, you know.
Yeah. And yeah, that requires some commitment and again, groundwork. So it's not for everyone, but yes, that's a great possibility there. So yes. Thank you very much, Lynn. And I just wanted to remind all our audience, the audience that we will have next week for the conference, that you will be probably COVID permitting and traveling permitting, let's hope so, in Italy in November.
November, beginning of December for lectures. Yeah.
So, specifically in Rome, and I must say our association is very solidly based in Rome, so it's going to be a pleasure. I hope to meet you in person at that time and to follow your long strain of talks. I'm sure it's going to be like Madonna on tour, I believe. So thank you once again, and I hope we can cross paths once again in the future and in Rome in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.